Hello, my name is Philip Bloom, and today I want to share with you my experiences with the Insta360 Pro, as well as my initial thoughts of the one, as well as all the other cameras that I've used for 360 video, and explain what it is I love about 360 video and why I have been on a quest for the past 2.5 years to find the perfect camera for me. But let's talk about the whole concept of 360 video and why we'd use it. Well, for me, it's a couple of things. The main one is to get an experience, to go somewhere else. You put on a headset like this, I like that feeling of being somewhere new and looking around. And if you've never seen 360 content through a headset, then you really are missing out. Whilst the scrolling around on YouTube and on Facebook, etc. is cool, it's still not quite the same thing. But the video out there that gives you that experience is really, really limited. Stills though do give you that feeling, and of course computer graphics do work really well. But I want that experience to feel as close to reality as possible. It's nowhere near, no cameras are anywhere near what we see right now, or a standard of what we're going to actually get with our 2D cameras and normal viewing cameras like the one I'm filming on right now, which have superb quality. No cameras for 360 video actually come anywhere near close to that, and that is what we really need. This is the Ricoh Theta M15. This was the very first 360 camera that I got. This was back in March 2015-ish. And initially I just thought it was a fun gimmick toy that I really wouldn't use much, just for sort of making those sort of warped images. And I started messing around with the whole tiny planets, but found that I really enjoyed it and really loved the whole perspective of what you could get. The stills out of this camera were actually quite good, but the video really wasn't. And 360 video, usable, good, let's not say good, let's have great 360 video, has been that elusive thing I've been looking for, but things have been changing pretty rapidly in that time. Ricoh brought out the Theta S, which had better image quality both in stills and video. It did full HD video at proper frame rate, but the quality really just simply wasn't good enough still. Other cameras came along and I bought them, especially the ones that had 4K. In fact, the first one that I had that had 4K was an Insta360 camera, and it was called the, not really confusingly, the Insta360 4K. And that was okay. It was quite expensive. It was about £800–900 or so at the time. And the image it wasn't great still, I just wasn't loving it. And the form factor was a little bit bulky, and just the whole way it worked with the software, it just wasn't for me. I mean, I still have it, but I haven't used it in about a year. In fact, the last time I used it was just for some tests. Then the Samsung Gear came along, and that was probably my favorite for a while because of the simple form factor. The usability, although at the time just with an Android phone, well, I am mostly iOS, but I do have Android devices because I love my gadgets. I actually used the Samsung Gear 360 for my first actual professional video gig using this medium, and it was simply to put a camera inside a beehive, and it worked really well. I tried a different setup as well with the Kodak Pix Pro, which is 2 cameras, but what I found was, because of the way these 360 cameras work, which is 2 lenses, 2 sensors, what you need to get is those sensors and cameras to be really close together, otherwise you lose a lot of stuff, and inside a beehive you're going to lose too much. The Ricoh Theta, for example, because the cameras are so close together, you lose very, very little. Bigger cameras you're going to lose even more. So even though I preferred the quality of the Kodak Pix Pro 4K with 2 cameras, for me, in that setup, the Samsung Gear was the right camera. So a year ago, I took all the 360 cameras that I owned on holiday to Skiathos in Greece, and I didn't put anything out. The main reason being I was disappointed with every single camera that I tested. I had the Insta360 4K, the Samsung Gear 360, the Kodak Pix Pro 360, the Ricoh M15, the Ricoh S, and the LG camera. And whilst the stills were fine on most of them, and the video was okay for the scrolling around, on a headset, none of them were acceptable. And it made me feel like maybe 4K is not enough resolution, maybe you need more. The problem is the 4K recording is for the entire image, and you do zoom in when you put the headset on or when you're scrolling around. That's the problem, you zoom in quite a lot actually, and that's where the quality drops. And again, that's what made me feel like I really did need higher resolution than 4K. I've actually never messed around properly with the multi-camera GoPro setups, although I've always been tempted because the quality I've seen from them has been pretty good. Using around 8 cameras or sometimes more, the results tend to be actually really good, but it is a hell of a workflow. And that's why I like these all-in-one units. The all-in-one units make things really nice and easy. Most of these cameras actually do all their stitching in camera, although I would prefer to actually be able to do it in post as well, because sometimes the in-camera stitching is a bit ropey. The best image I have found until recently has been on the Garmin Verb 360, I think that's what it's called. It has a max resolution in video of 5.7K. Again, looking for that higher resolution, which is kind of what I was looking for at that point. The results actually aren't that bad, of course, until you zoom in. That 5.7K resolution doesn't make a huge amount of difference. And I quite like the fact you can have this sort of heads-up display which shows speed and altitude and stuff like that, which is really good for certain people doing exciting stuff. But for the 360 stuff I want to do, I don't really see me using that much. So when I was given an opportunity to try out the Insta360 Pro, I was very excited about that prospect because it shoots at 8K up to 30 frames per second. It does actually do proper VR video, as in stereoscopic, at 6K. I haven't messed around with any of that yet. I've just kept on the straight mono 8K high resolution stuff for now. It's something I would like to try and get used to as well, but my experiments really just wanted to concentrate. I really just wanted to see what the max resolution stuff was like. So I took it back to Skathos. Well, I didn't go back in time. I went on holiday again this year. It's one of my favourite places in the world. I just love it. It's a very small island, very beautiful, and it's just absolutely love it. Everything I look for in a really nice, relaxing holiday. So I took it around to my favourite places, and it is quite bulky for what it is. It's certainly way bigger than any of the other 360 cameras that I've got, and a lot more expensive, around $3,500 or so, whereas the most expensive one that I own is probably like the Kodak or the Garmin, which are around £800. The Insta360 Pro is made up of 6 cameras, and it saves those 6 shots individually on the SD card. It also has a 5K mode which does the stitching internally. But it was the max resolution stuff again that I really want to try out to see if 8K really does make a difference. When I set up a 360 camera, especially when you're using a headset, I really want something to be transported there. So I try to get it at sort of adult height. So on a beach, standing up. That does mean a tripod. You could get something smaller without showing the feet, but I'd be worried about it falling over and stuff. So although you can see if you look down, and you could cover it over with a big circle logo or something like that, I wasn't too bothered about that. If you have the camera too low, like on the ground, it'll be, when you put on the headset, feel like you're actually lying down on the ground, which will be a bit weird when people are walking around you. It makes you want to stand up and you can't. That's the thing about the VR experience, or the 360 video experience with the headset. It's totally passive. There is no interaction. If you want that, get a PlayStation 4 with the 360 stuff, or get the Oculus, or get any of the other ones out there, which are really amazing, which are video games like the new Resident Evil is terrifying. Of course, a video experience within This is going to be passive. It has to be passive. You can't move around. It's just not possible. The camera is in a fixed position. How on earth could you make the camera move to respond to if you had sensors like the Oculus Rift systems or the other high-end systems which have sensors around the room which detect when you're moving? That's fine for computer graphics, but when it's video, right now, the technology, or certainly not the cameras that I'm using, could possibly do that. It certainly did attract a lot of attention, a lot of looks when I was using it. A lot of people asking what it was. I mean, it looks a little bit like an alien, like a robot, a face. It's actually really quite cute. It's quite noisy when the fan is going, which it needs to cool down, especially in the really quite hot temperature I had in Skiathos at the time. But you can turn the fan off, which makes it silent. So the 4 mics work, and the 4 mics work really well so that you actually have the sound that follows the video when you've got the headsets or scrolling around, which is really, really cool. But it does overheat, so you then have to wait for it to cool down. And there is a mode to sample the fan noise. So what it does, it just records audio, and then you can use that to subtract it from your video that you record with the fan noise. I did try it, but for me, recording the sound properly, cleanly, that's the way to go. I just have to be patient and let it cool down between shots. And the app is okay, it does work. It creates its own hotspot, so you can have a look at the shot and see if it's working, change some of your settings. I found it did disconnect pretty easily, even if I wasn't that far away from the camera. And you do want to try and be far away from the camera, because that's the thing, you don't want to be in shot when shooting 360 video unless you're a real narcissist and just want it to be about you the whole time. I hit record and I try and hide somewhere in my shots that you'll see in my montage. Look, and you might spot me, and some of them are much more obvious than others, but I did try and hide as much as possible. And the problem is, when I did hide, I did find that it was really hard to control the camera remotely because I'd lost the Wi-Fi connection. So pretty much most of the time I had to then go back to the camera, stop it manually, and change settings for another shot. The image quality for me really was impressive. The 8K looked very crisp and very detailed. Don't think the bit rate is really high enough for what it is, and it is 8-bit, so you are going to have issues with nice solid colors like the blue sky. So, I mean, that is a downside to it. It does not record in the highest recording format you can get. There are other cameras out there which record in a much higher quality, like the expensive Nokia Ozo. I uploaded some of my clips to YouTube to see how well they worked, and yes, YouTube will compress it even more. I was impressed, although I do have a very fast internet connection, but it was still buffering quite a lot. The 4K was fine with the buffering, and actually wasn't too bad. If I added a little bit of sharpening in post, I found the 4K came to life. The downside being that the 8K felt, and does feel, a little bit overly sharpened if you've done that. The stitching software that I use is a free download from the Insta360.com website, and it works fine. You don't really have any ability to tweak it much though, so you just have to go with what it's got, unless you're going to use a separate, much more expensive program to put it together. And for the most part, it did work really well. I did have a few shots which were a little bit, let's say, squiffy in their stitching. You can certainly see it on horizons, and I tried to fix some of these, and certainly the ones where my camera wasn't quite level, I did have to fix the horizon and stuff using the Metal VR plugins, which are now free within Premiere, and they worked well, but it didn't work on some of the more dodgy looking horizons. This is the first time I have shot video in 360 that I really love and can look at and enjoy and put a headset on, and to a point feel like I'm there. Obviously it's not the same, and the quality isn't perfect. It's still not fantastic, I mean, we're still in the early days. Things are going to get better. And I think we are still limited, of course, to our screens. Whether we're looking at it through a headset with a phone as our screen, or we're using an Oculus, or we're using my PlayStation VR headset, for example. All of these are limited by the quality of the screens as well, because you do start seeing pixels. The amount we have to crop in is really quite substantial, and that's why having an 8K source image makes a huge difference. This is how much we will zoom in when you look at an upload on YouTube. When you're viewing this shot as a 360 video, this is what your field of view will be, and this is how much we have to zoom in. If we're starting with an 8K image, we're obviously going to have much better results. If we're going to start with an HD image and zoom in, don't expect good results, and we don't get good results. That's why 4K is the absolute bare minimum. But even 4K zooms in so much, it's certainly nowhere near 4K resolution that we're looking at when we are looking at our upload. In fact, it's barely HD. It probably isn't even HD. I have so many different video cameras and stills cameras that shoot 4K, and their quality is so varied. This Canon 1DX Mark II is by far one of the very best cameras that I own that shoots 4K for cropping in. This is 4K recording on an HD timeline, and I am scaled down to 50% to fill it in because there's too much resolution. But when I zoom in to 1:1 to match the HD timeline, obviously it's going to look really good. And if you really want to go even closer to my face, which is not ideal, you're going to see it really does hold up. This is one of the best cameras I own for cropping in. Lots of them, the other ones I have are still very good, but this I really think is the best one. I have obviously phones and things that shoot 4K, and GoPros, and you try cropping in on those, the amount that you need to crop in for 360 video, and it really doesn't look very good. So you need to have a really high quality 4K source if 4K is going to be your recording format for this system. 8K and really high quality, great sensors and good glass, all good combinations for what you really need to get good, well, great 360 video. Last but not least, this is the Insta360 One, the newest camera from Insta360 Pro, consumer camera, about $300, and it shoots 4K. It has a number of very cool features though. 6-axis stabilization inside makes a huge difference for shots. It is very, very, very clever. It also has a number of, I would call them party tricks. One of them is bullet time. I'm not sure. I thought bullet time might be trademarked, but maybe it isn't. Which is a case of simply attaching some string to the quarter 20 on here, putting it into slow motion mode, which is 3 clicks on this, and then spinning it around. And then putting it into post. It records in a sort of a sub HD of 120 frames per second, and then it does some conversion inside the app to create 240 frames per second. And it's fun. Quality wise, it's not great, but for social media, yeah, it works absolutely fine. The other thing which is really cool about it, again with the app, is called free roaming. So recording that 4K video, and you're able to zoom in and move around with the app. And this is really cool. The only downside I can say to this is, of course, you're zooming in on an image which isn't perfect to start with. So when you want to zoom in a lot, then you are going to lose a lot of quality. And again, it's fine for Facebook, social media and stuff like that. But if you're going to start blowing it up, maybe put it on the TV, it's not really going to hold up for that. But I don't think that's really what it's for. This is a fun device, it's a consumer device, and it is, well, it's probably one of the best, if not the best, all-in-one unit I've got in that price bracket.
This is software based, of course. This is done within the app, in fact done on the actual iPhone app. But it is when you start zooming in, you do really lose that quality. As you can see here, this is in Kyoto, in Japan, walking around. When I pull back and get wider and get more of that spherical look, the quality is better. But the moment I start zooming in, then you do lose a lot of quality. That's because you are taking that 4K image and cropping in a lot. And you also are losing quality by compressing it within the app. Here it looks great, but of course this isn't really much use for most things. But it's fun, and for social media, it's fantastic. If you put the Insta360 Pro on a stick, now we're talking.
I think I'm probably just spoilt with the quality of the video because I have been using the Insta360 Pro, which is so lovely. Anything next to it pales in comparison. But then again, the Insta360 Pro is not something I'm going to be going around with me when I just go out and about, going out with friends or other stuff, or even for most shoots, because it's too big and bulky. When I'm using it, I really be using it for a specific reason, where something like the One is something that will go in my man bag and always have with me and be able to use. And for most stuff, it's going to be absolutely perfectly fine for that sort of thing. It's not going to be used, certainly by me, for any professional 360 gigs. That's where the professional 360 cameras come in. There's a number of other cameras which have come out or are coming out of a similar price bracket to the Pro or much higher, and some of them do have larger sensors, but I have not tried them. But I do love the Pro. It is by far the best 360 video camera that I've used, and it is something I would love to own and take with me to all these different places and shoot these cool things. I also want to experiment more. I need stories. I can't just have all of these just one single shot, because that's not my filmmaking style. I want a narrative, ideally a story in there. Documentary is my forte, so telling a documentary through the 360 video medium is really something I want to do. And then we could potentially look for myself, certainly, at 360 narrative fiction, and this camera could be a very good option for it. 360 video is not a replacement for traditional filming for me. It's just something new and something to experiment with, and I love that creative aspect of it. So that's it for this video. I hope it was useful for you, and do check out my YouTube 360 channel for some longer shots as well. I'll put all my little uploads from different cameras, and my main channel, of course, is what you're watching on, which should have any proper complete stuff like the bees edit is on here. So thanks for watching. Oh, and there's the Insta361 turning off, so I guess I should turn off too. Bye.